Today on the Lowdown, a Down syndrome podcast, Janice Pearson gives us the lowdown on financial supports for adults with Down syndrome. Over to you, Hannah Marla.
Thanks, Danielle. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Lowdown podcast. My name is Marla, and with me here is my co-host, Hina. Hello, Hina.
Hi, Marla.
You ready for another episode?
Yes, let's do it.
All right. On today's episode, we will be looking towards the future and talk about the financial supports for adults with Down syndrome. This episode will focus on financial support service that is unique to where we are in BC and Canada, but we hope that it provides listeners living outside of BC with some insight into what they could or should look for, or what they should think about when they're planning ahead for their loved one with Down syndrome. On today's episode, we'll be speaking to two parents who have gone through the process of arranging funding for their adult children with Down syndrome. We have Glen, who's also our producer extraordinaire and previous guest on the Lowdown, and he's a father of a young adult with Down syndrome. And our other guest is Janice Pearson, who's a mother of two. She has a son and a daughter, and her daughter Lindsay is 31 and has Down syndrome. For the majority of Lindsay's life, her parents have had to advocate for her to get services and to find the right opportunities that really meet her needs. And she is one of the parents who participated in the initial creation and development of a group based on a model in Victoria, in British Columbia, not Victoria elsewhere. And the group has been in operation for about 9 years. So she's going to lend her experience to this conversation as well. Welcome to both of you, Glen and Janice. Great to have you here.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Our pleasure. Our pleasure. So we'll get started right with our secret questions. I'm going to start with you, Glen. What is one item on your bucket list?
Oh, wow. Bucket list. I don't have a very extensive bucket list, but one item is to go to a World Cup soccer game. And fortunately, the next World Cup is going to be hosting some games here in Vancouver. So that might actually happen in the not too distant future.
Totally. I sense a check mark on the list in the future there for you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Janice, what about you? What's one thing on your bucket list?
One thing on my bucket list, I think that's to go to Ireland.
Yeah, very lovely. It's a good one.
I think I need to do that.
Mm-hmm. And I have another question for you, Glen. What would you say is the best invention? You can be as creative as you like there.
The best invention. Boy.
We had to give you tricky ones because you've been on before.
Me today. I know you're going to know everything about questions. Me. Well, I don't know if it's the best invention, and in some ways it's probably the worst invention, but I'll just go with the smartphone, because it's pretty incredible that we can carry our entire music library and our entire book library and everything else we need.
Shopping list and calendar.
Yeah.
Totally.
I'll go with that.
All right. I think that's a good answer. Janice, what about you? What would you say is...
Glen beat me to it because I was thinking that, and I was also thinking maybe that's not politically correct to say, but however, you did that, and I'm proud of you, Glen. So I'm going to go with the bicycle.
It was revolutionary. Still is.
It still is, and it keeps changing. It's fantastic. It gives all sorts of opportunities to everybody now. Yeah.
Okay, I'll take over for the last question. Janice, I'll start with you first. If you could instantly become an expert in something, what would it be?
Oh. Well, I'm pretty much an expert at everything, I figure.
I love it.
My husband tells me so. No, oh, geez. That's really, I would want to be an expert at cooking.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Great. Awesome. All right, Glen, over to you.
Wow. Well, I could go down a big rabbit trail with this one, but I have strong interests in climate change and in disabilities. So I would say I would like to be an expert in how climate change impacts people with disabilities and what we can do to help them through it.
Right. Very good. Those are both very good things to be experts in. Okay, well, thank you to both of you for indulging us in that. Let's kind of shift our focus towards our topic for the day. So, Glen, how about we start with you first? Can you tell our listeners a little bit about what CLBC is, what it stands for, and what's the main purpose of this organization?
Sure. So CLBC stands for Community Living BC. It's a provincial crown corporation here in British Columbia that funds supports and services to adults with developmental disabilities and helps them live as independently as possible. A crown corporation means that it's not actually part of the government, but it receives its funding from the government. And then it works with individuals, families, service providers, community, and government partners to support as many people as it can with this funding. There's different types of funding that are available through CLBC, which we'll be talking about today. But briefly, the 4 big buckets are housing support, respite, community inclusion, and skill development.
Okay. So you said that it's getting funding from the government, but it's not, so it's working independently of the government, correct?
Right. So basically the government gives CLBC a budget for the year, and then CLBC basically carves up that budget to support as many people as it can in each person's area of needs. But inherently, there's some limitations with that because they do have a fixed annual budget, and the needs are usually greater than they have budget to cover.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's the case with a lot of those kind of situations where the need is always greater than the support can provide. So you did mention the 4 different areas of support that CLBC offers. Are you able to kind of give us a quick little insight into what each of those 4 domains would include? Like, what would skill building include? What would community inclusion include?
Sure. So my daughter is just turning 19 next month at the time of this recording, which is when she officially is supported by CLBC. So a lot of this is new to me, but based on my understanding, so housing helps with the cost of living independently or semi-independently under various housing models, whether it's home shares or staffed residential or other options. Respite is basically support for families to essentially be able to have a break and have someone else assisting with the care of their loved one at times. Skill development is actually quite relevant here at the Down Syndrome Resource Foundation because we have recently become an approved service provider for CLBC under the skill development umbrella. So this would be programs that are educational or I think also recreational in nature that help with the personal and intellectual and educational development of people with disabilities. And community inclusion is for programs that help people be included in the community and connect with various programs and services in the community.
It seems to be like a wide range of services can fall in any of the 4 domains that you talked about. When can someone access CLB support?
So as I mentioned, you can begin receiving the support when the individual turns 19, which my daughter is about to. It's a very long process to get approved and sort of jump through all the hoops. They recommend that you start that process when your child is 16, which we did. And I think she was actually approved when she was just about to turn 18. So we got through the process in about 1.5 to 2 years.
So let's talk a little bit about that process. So you had mentioned earlier that it's based on each individual person's needs. So like, how did they assess that for your daughter?
Right. So it's a very long and at times
Janice laughs.
very confusing process for most parents. It's overwhelming. Through my job at the Down Syndrome Resource Foundation, I had some advanced knowledge, probably more than most parents do when they're first starting out. And I still found it very overwhelming and just a lot to understand. I think when my daughter was 16, I took like an 8-part webinar series, which was just explaining the process and how it all works. So it's not something that's highly accessible or intuitive, unfortunately.
And I'm quite sure that they have a role within the organization that's called a navigator. So that tells you something about the fact that they need a job of navigator tells you that it's not a clear-cut
complex it is,
situation.
Yeah, the navigator actually, they don't work for CLBC. I can't remember which organization they're under.
Might be.
It might be, or it might even be like Fraser Health, but they help you navigate not only CLBC but other things to do with the transition to adulthood, like your persons with a disability, financial support, and that kind of thing. But yes, the fact that there are professionals whose entire job is to help get you through this process tells you that it's not a straightforward process. But as far as the process goes, I believe it starts with a written application, which, like I said, we did when Becca was about 16. And that includes gathering various assessments that have been done through her childhood and high school in particular. And based on that written application and all the documentation that you pull together, they make their decision on whether or not you qualify to be supported by CLBC. So that's sort of the first hurdle. And we got through that probably when she was 17, I would say.
Wow.
And then at that point, you get linked up with a CLBC facilitator. And the facilitator is the one who sort of gets to know you and does a much more in-depth assessment of your child's needs. I believe for us, it was at least 3 or 4 sort of hour-long sessions that we spent with her. She came to our house and interviewed us and basically worked through a giant checklist. And by the end of that, the idea is they know your child inside out and have a clear picture of their needs. At least that's the goal. And they actually, she actually wrote a report that sort of summarized everything that we talked about during these sessions. We had a few chances to sort of go back and forth on the report to make sure that it reflected sort of what you saw, what is reality for our daughter Becca and her needs. And then at that point, I might be mixing up the order of operations here, but they do give each individual, I will call a rating, which we don't like ratings, but you get basically 2 scores. One score is supposed to measure the level of need for support that the individual has. It's scored out of 5. With the closer to 5 you get, the more support you need. And then they also have a score that relates to sort of the urgency of the need. if it's sort of an emergency situation where support is needed immediately versus, the family is a stable environment and they're not in a rush necessarily to get the support, then there's less urgency. And in theory, the way this works is that those with higher support needs and the greater urgency are supposed to receive more support. But like anything that involves subjective evaluations, there are definitely lots of families left feeling like they are not getting as much support as their individual actually needs.
Mm-hmm. Janice, sorry, go ahead. No, you go ahead. I was just
going to say, and then from there, at least how it worked with us is we were presented with the 4 buckets that I mentioned earlier: housing, respite, community inclusion, and skill development. And we were asked sort of what our top 1 or 2 priorities are out of those 4, because you're not going to get funding for everything. So you basically tell them what your top priority is, and then they decide if they're able to provide that support.
Okay. Janice, I was just curious, was your experience similar to Glen's in terms of the process of getting Lindsay into the CLBC program?
Oh, yeah. Yes. Very, very, very similar. In fact, you kind of reminded me about it because I've forgotten about it.
I hope I haven't created any PTSD for you.
PTSD? No. I'm so grateful I don't have to do that anymore. She's kind of got that. You just have to work for, it's crazy that you have to go through that whole process. Like, it's so difficult on the families and the individuals, and there's been all these reports done all the way along. And I remember we did not have they never did intelligence tests, whatever they're called.
Psych ed.
They never did that to Lindsay when she was in school, because it was they deemed it a waste of time and resources and money and everything like that. And technically, I didn't need that either. I knew what was going on, right? And but when she was applying to go to CLBC to get CLBC supports, we had to go and get an IQ test. What's the other word?
Psychoeducational assessment.
Yeah. And that's the right word. Sorry. But basically it was the most ridiculous thing I've ever gone through, and I had to pay like $1,500 for it to prove that
she's who she is.
She needs exactly. Yeah.
And it might actually
say that she was mentally retarded. I'm just going to say it. That is what they had to say when we went through it. That's what they had to say in order to get CLBC funding.
Yeah, and it might have actually been just a straight IQ test, because now that you mention it, I do remember that sort of the basic cutoff is that CLBC supports individuals with an IQ under 70. Or if they have autism spectrum disorder. But for everyone else, people with Down syndrome, basically it's the IQ of 70 is sort of the cutoff.
And
there's a lot of similarity with the program for ages 5 to 18, where it's a similar proof of deficit you need
or
this
disability.
enough. And by doing quote unquote poorly on the assessment, you actually do better, because then you get in, and it's very backwards.
And that's the thing. Like, it's sad to hear that you have to prove how bad a disability is or something in order to get support. Like, just, I mean, like it's, and then Glen mentioned, like, rating something like that is heartbreaking, I'm sure, as a parent also, to be like, okay, you're putting a number on my child or my child's ability to do something. And once you prove what that number is, when you're going to get support, when you just needed support all along. So it's really, it's a very sad way.
It's one of those tests where you want the highest, the highest score,
the worst score you could get. Exactly.
Yes. You don't want your child to be, you don't want to present your individual as super capable,
it's not a best foot forward.
Exactly. Glenn, so after all of this was done, the 1.5 years to 2 years that it took to get Becca set up, how are you now using your CLBC funding for Becca?
Right. So we did get respite because that's something that's very important to us. But in terms of the other areas, our priority was actually housing, which I think is probably pretty unusual for sort of the 19 to 20-year-old set. In our case, that's important because Becca has extremely high needs, support needs. She has both Down syndrome and autism. She has all kinds of medical complications. She's not toilet trained. She has sleep issues. So it's very much a 24/7 care scenario. And meanwhile, we also have a son who also has developmental disabilities and is a future CLBC client. And my wife also has some major ongoing health issues at the moment. She's getting ready to have a kidney transplant in the next year and has been in hospital quite a bit. So we're really at the point where as much as we'd love to care for Becca ourselves, this is just what our family needs right now. So we chose housing as our sort of our initial focus. And then within that, there's sort of different categories as well. Our feeling, well, more than a feeling, we know that Becca requires round-the-clock, hands-on, big-time support. CLBC in general is shifting away from staffed residential housing, which we would traditionally call a group home, and moving towards more home shares, which is generally a more independent model. And they definitely prefer people to go down the home share route, and it is less money for them as well. So I'm sure that's part of the reason they prefer it. And I mean, we totally agree that everyone should live it as independently as possible, and that's an ideal model for those who are able to be fairly independent. But for our daughter, we've known all along that that's really not an option, and that in order to meet her needs, it will require a staffed residence. And so when she was first approved for housing support, which was about 4 months ago, keeping in mind that she doesn't actually get it until she turns 19, she was approved strictly for home share and not for staffed residential. And we knew immediately that her needs go beyond what home shares provide. And at the time, we were told basically we have to give it a try for at least a year and essentially prove that a home share won't work, which at first I thought that meant they want us to actually stick her in a home share and fail at it and prove that it doesn't work. It actually also meant that, if we could, try to find a suitable home share, and then after a certain period of time, sort of say, look, there's no home shares that offer the level of support she needs, then they might reconsider. So until about a month ago, we were expecting to spend the next year sort of cooling our heels, proving that there was no home share that would work, and then see where we're at. But just a couple weeks ago, out of the clear blue sky, our facilitator emailed us and said that there's a new staffed residence opening up in our area, and she was invited to put Becca's name forward for consideration for that. So I'm not quite sure what changed on their end, but apparently, I guess we've made our case already that a home share wasn't going to work, and now there is this possibility. It's not confirmed yet, but we're working towards seeing if this will be a fit for her.
Wow. Sorry.
And in summary, I think we can say it is not stress-free.
At all.
Yeah. I'm curious, Glen, if you've found anything to be helpful in all of this. Have you been able to develop an understanding with the facilitator or any other community resources that you thought, okay, this person is willing to help me advocate here?
Sure. Well, I will say that we like our facilitator. She's good at what she does, and we certainly don't blame her or even necessarily CLBC. Like, we understand the challenge that the government gives them this amount of money and they have this many people to support, and everyone has their different needs and they can't meet everyone's needs on the money they're given. So I understand from that perspective that their hands are a bit tied. So we do have a good relationship with our facilitator. I definitely found it frustrating that she was initially approved for something that every one of us knew was not going to meet her needs.
Yeah.
Like, we knew it, the facilitator knew it. We interviewed several agencies that operate home shares and group homes, and every agency we interviewed said, yeah, this level of support that she needs, it goes beyond home share. So that was definitely frustrating. We're counting ourselves lucky that they seem to have changed their minds faster than they usually do. So we're feeling optimistic at this point. In terms of other support, we haven't engaged much with this organization, but the Family Support Institute, they're the ones that presented the initial webinars that helped me sort of get my head around the whole process. And I know that they will come alongside families and actively advocate, and they can provide people who will literally come into meetings with you, who've been through this process and help you. So if someone's looking for that kind of support, I would recommend FSI.
And we'll put that in the show notes for anybody who's listening so they can find some of those resources. I think I've known this story since before this episode, but it's partially stunning because you are informed and you already work in this community and you know who to talk to and where to go. And it is still exceptionally full of red tape and challenging. And so I can just imagine other families hearing this and being very overwhelmed. So I'm glad to hear that there are a few sort of helpers along the way who can come in and support.
And I would also recommend that families get the navigator if they can, which the navigator typically works with people in their late teens, sort of like 16 to 18, to sort of help you know what has to be done at each stage.
And I think I'm so happy you brought that up, because I think that's an important thing. It's like, you started this whole process for Becca when she was 16. So I'm assuming you would highly encourage families, both you and Janice, to start early and not wait till they're 18.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because like everything I had heard recommended 16. That's what they said on the webinar. The navigator gave us this literal roadmap that tracked from age 16 to 19 and what you should do at each age. And we just followed that. But it seems like not many people actually do follow it, because every time we tried to do something at the exact same time that we were told to do it, everyone was surprised. Oh, you're so on top of it. No one ever applies this early. I'm like, well, we're just following the instructions we were given. And we did end up getting through the process sort of a year ahead of schedule. So I guess you could probably start at 17 and be done by the time they're 19. But we just like to have all our ducks in a row.
So. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it also takes time to gather all that paperwork, right? Like, I mean, it's just like, you're not thinking about saving each and every piece of paperwork when they're 4, 5, or 6, but it is another thing to let families know that all those documents are important to keep, because it'll make your job much easier when you get to this part of the process. So,
right. Yeah. And I guess, there is the potential that you don't have some of the assessments that they want you to have. And then you're in Janice's situation where you have to then go out and do that. And you can't just walk into a psychologist's office and ask this to get done. There's wait lists for all of those kinds of things. So that could slow the process really significantly.
Sure.
Yeah. Janice, I want to turn to you now a little bit because you also received support for Lindsay, but you received different supports. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what supports through CLBC you have for Lindsay?
Okay.
What buckets?
When we started off the process, there was no money. There wasn't a penny. I didn't get anything other than respite for years. And then we went through the DSRF and stuff like that, did the programs there, luckily, as Lindsay entered her adulthood. And when we were going through that, there was a couple of us parents that were freaking out because what are we going to do after this is gone? You go from that period of having your individual in school to, 5 days a week, 5 hours a day. And then all of a sudden they're an adult and there really is limited opportunities for them. After we kind of played out all our opportunities at the DSRF and graduated and sort of went, okay, now what are we going to do? 2 of us went to CLBC and together, and we kind of argued and presented our case that these girls didn't fall into the typical day programs, wouldn't be happy, it wouldn't suit them, blah, 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 blah. And we really had to advocate, argue, present our case, and spend a lot of time doing it. But eventually we both got some individualized funding, and that's what we currently have for Lindsay, is individualized funding. And with that, it was to cover community inclusion. You weren't allowed to do skill development. You weren't allowed to pay for skill development through that. It's changed a bit over the years. So we were limited what we could do, but it was more community inclusion, job opportunities, out in the community doing volunteer work, riding the buses, this type of thing. So we did that for a year, and then we just went this isn't good. So we ended up talking to a group of people, a group of parents whose children were at various levels of adulthood, and we kind of formed a little parent group. We kind of talked about what we wanted to see and what was available, and we came up with an idea following something in Victoria called Inclusion Works in Victoria. And what that is, it's a model where I get some IF funding and another parent gets some IF funding, and people might get some respite and this type of thing. And we pool our money together so that we can have support workers and we can develop a program for them during the week that's going to meet their needs. So that's what we decided to do. And it ended up that 6 of us kind of had 6 parents, 6 family members kind of got together, and we said, okay, this is how much money we have in individualized funding. And there was only 3 of us that had it at the time. And then a couple of people had respite. And the whole idea behind it was that whatever funds we got from CLBC, we threw it into this pot. It didn't matter whether you had $300 going into the pot, or I think at the time Lindsay was getting a couple of them were getting $1,400 a month. We pooled it and we said, okay, let's create a program. We hired a couple of them support workers, and we went out and said, okay, we want it community-based. We want to have them learning how to ride buses, learning their community, out in the community, not going to the same spot every day, trying different things that are going on in the community. And that's basically what we did. And so for the first year, we had just 3 people that had funding, and the others were trying to get funding. And at that time, I don't know what has changed at CLBC, but there was zero funding. Everybody was turned away. And then finally, a few people did get some funding, and we got a grant from I think it was West Vancouver. West Vancouver gave us a $10,000 grant, so we were able to start up our program the first year, and we did some things in West Van, and we did some things in North Van. We rode buses in between, and they all had their maps, and we were trying to get them as independent as possible. So we did that for 2 years like that, and then we kind of saw, okay, there's some changes we have to make, and some more people got some funding, and it just gave us a little bit bigger budget. Nowadays, I think we have a budget of about 90,000 because of the individualized funding that our group, the participants in our group get, and I'm just trying. Don't quote me for sure on the 90,000, but it's about that. And we also charge other people to come to our program because we have speech therapy, we have literacy, we have art classes, we have taekwondo classes, we have, all these things, and they're all over. It's through the community centers and in community, like the taekwondo is an independent place. We have work experience. We have a couple of people that go and do work experience at a couple of the breweries, and there's just all sorts of opportunities for everybody. And it doesn't matter how much you financially participate in the program. It's like, what do you want to get out of this? And so this is our 9th year of doing this. And it's fantastic. They all love it. We've even had before the pandemic, we had set up a little social enterprise, a little card making program, and bags. We'd sold Christmas cards and bags. Pandemic ruined everything, so we're just getting back into. This is our first year, like fully operational, starting in September. So, and we operate our program September to June, and take the summers off, save our money up in the summertime, and then we have enough money to operate for the year. Does that make sense?
It does. I think it makes sense, but I want to play it out through the eyes of somebody like Lindsay. So what does Lindsay's day or week look like? Like, how does this work for her?
How does it work for her? Okay, well, Monday through Friday, they have a schedule of things that are going on during the week, things that are scheduled. So I'm just thinking, I wish I had a schedule in front of me. Just a sec. Oh yeah, here it is. Okay, so every day we start up someplace different. We rent rooms in the rec centers. So she starts off at Harry Jerome. They all meet. They go into the youth lounge. The youth lounge we rent out, maybe for a half an hour or an hour, and they kind of get together. They have, we call it show and tell, and I know that sounds simple, but it gives them all an opportunity to sit down, connect, and talk about their weekends. It is absolutely amazing, the connection between the individuals, right? Because they have all these opportunities to communicate. And they go off and they'll go to have fitness, whatever that would be. Sometimes it's spin, sometimes it's in the gym. We have a different instructor, and they go around and do that. And then they go and eat a packed lunch someplace, like maybe in the atrium or back to the youth lounge. And then they go, they do an art class, and kind of that's the end of the day.
Okay.
So that goes from about 10:30 till 2:30 on. And
is this something? Is Lindsay and all the rest of the group, are people being dropped off? Are they taking the bus there?
They're dropped off, and they maneuver around with the support workers. We have 2 support workers, and I don't even want to call them support workers. We've tried to set it up so that it's almost like a peer network, the individuals that run our program, that do all the work with the young adults, they are, very close to their age and very capable young people. They do the art with them. They do the workouts with them. It's not like, it's all one great group.
They're not in charge per se.
Pardon me?
they're not in charge per se. They're kind of
they
facilitating.
all look at each other, they're buddies, and they text each other. I mean, that's the other thing that we work on is texting each other, and phoning each other, and checking in on people that aren't there, and it's just fantastic. So that's it. That on Mondays they go to one little area in North Vancouver. Then on Tuesdays they go and have some of them go to work experience. Lindsay does not. Lindsay goes to a literacy program, and then they go shopping and get groceries for lunch, and they go to a different youth lounge, and the whole time they're just moving around the community, and they make lunch, and then they have speech therapy, and then their day's done. So that's
kind of the flow of things.
The flow. And if you don't want to participate in something, you don't have to. You can go and do something else. Like sometimes people will go swimming and the other people will go bowling. It's like,
Janice, I have a quick question too. So you said that there's 2 engagement workers or people that help lead and run the program. Are those, so do you have other people that are helping with that too? Like, I'm assuming if she's doing speech therapy of an SLP as part of the program. So I'm just curious who's involved.
Yeah, we do have instructors for all the programs. Really, there's the only thing that our support workers are doing is going grocery shopping with them and making lunch and doing all that kind of thing.
Navigating.
But otherwise, we have professionals teaching them all those other things.
So I'm really curious because this has been running for quite a while now in its sort of various iterations. How much maintenance, I'm thinking of, parents who are hearing this thinking, yes, this sounds great. And I'm wondering how much time are you and the other parents spending on getting this arranged at this point? How much maintenance work is here?
Okay, so initially it is a lot of work. Parents have to be committed. You have to, we all signed a family participation agreement so that, we had to commit to a year of funding, and we had to, if we weren't going to participate, we have to let everybody know, right? I think that there are always some that want to do more than others, and which is fine, or able to, which is fine. It's always worked out really well in our group. I mean, we've definitely had some issues over the years, like conflicts and that type of thing, but they're all things that we've worked out. And I think it's good to say, basically we're the same group that we started off with. So that does.
That means it's working for people. Yeah.
Yeah. And a couple of people have left. 2 people left during the pandemic because they moved, and another person left the group because it didn't quite meet her needs to the same degree. They wanted to do some other things, and if there was some, differences or whatever. So, and then we also allow. So we have a core group of parents and individuals, and then we also allow people to participate in the programs that we have if they bring their own support worker, or if they are able to come and go on their own, because we just don't have the resources to support them. So it's been awesome for our community as well, not just for the individuals that that we're designing this for. It's really benefited many people. We also run a musical theater program or support that. It started off with us, but now it's a separate community entity, but we're still very much involved. Our group is still very much involved in it and stuff. So there's been all sorts of amazing things come out of it. But I think most importantly is the connection between the individuals that it's really hard for some of our offspring here to make friends and connect, and it takes a lot of work. And with the combination of our speech and language program, which she really works on social communication and that type of thing, and they know so much about each other now, and it's fabulous to see.
Really genuine friendships and connections.
Very genuine. They're all very much, they all like June, but they really look forward to September too.
Well, that's a really good sign. I'm wondering if you have, so people listen to this kind of all over the place, and people listening might be thinking, oh, I wonder if I could or should set up something like this. So I'm wondering if you have any lessons learned that you'd like to share that have kind of come to you during this process.
Well, I think the most important thing is that you have to have a group of parents that can work together, and you have to have a group of individuals that can work together too.
Yeah, want to be together. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's understandable because there's such diverse needs out there in each individual,
and personalities.
So you have to have some compatibility, and your level of support has to be sort of consistent across the group, and for some people that's easy to find. Other people, it's not so easy. But we've been fairly fortunate with our group that they all get along quite well, and they get along really well, and same with the parents and stuff. So it's good.
It's worked out. And what can you recommend as like a starting place for families who want to plan from like inklings and ideas to happening on the ground? How long did that take for your group? I am assuming that you knew these parents already, actually.
Well, some of them we did. Some of them some of them I did. Some of them I didn't. If you're from the Down Syndrome Club, you know a lot of them. But there's also individuals with other needs in our group. So we actually, I guess, from the community, we were. Many of the parents were in the Community Living BC parent group. And so we kind of heard about this program in Victoria. We got together. We started off maybe with a few, probably 10 parents, but then it doesn't meet everybody's needs or parents' abilities to participate in this. So we dropped off a few, but that's where we really came together, was through word of mouth, through this CLBC group that some of us were part of. Yeah.
And did it take maybe a year or two to get it going?
We had this amazing man that was kind of driving us. His child wasn't able to participate because of her needs, but he really wanted to see this get off the ground, and he was fantastic. He really got us going and kept us going, and we got started in a year. So a year, 8 months of planning so that we could get going in September.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that's a really good sort of rubric almost for families who are interested in starting this kind of thing. It takes time. Yeah,
for sure. And you figure out how much of a commitment it is as well, like for yourself. And I have to say that your support workers, your employees, your whatever, the coordinators are so important. Like, we have been so lucky with ours. We have the same people more or less for the first 8 years. And last year, both of our long-term employees had moved on to different things. And so we had 2 new people this year, and they've been fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. So fingers crossed they'll stay for another 8 years.
Yeah. A lot of care and attention put into those interviews and figuring out the right kind of fit. Yeah. That really long-term commitment.
Yes, because initially we thought we needed somebody that was university educated, blah, 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 all these things. And then when we started doing this, we went, no, that's not what we need. We need somebody, we just need peers. We need people that want to go out and be like them.
And I think that's the really inspiring thing, is that you got together, you got the funding, and you created a program that you knew would be meaningful for your kids, right? You didn't model it after like, some big thing you saw somewhere else. You're like, we're going to take what works for us, change it and adjust it so that it meets the needs for the people that it's created for. And not like you're not following your own agenda, but you're kind of creating something with your kids in mind. So I think, and that's why it's going on for so long, is because it is something that's so meaningful for the people that you made it for. So that's really great.
Great.
Mm-hmm. Well, Glen and Janice, thank you both for joining us today. I think this is a big topic, and I know it weighs very heavily on the minds of teenagers and young adults, parents, as they try to navigate and figure out what their person is going to be doing when high school is finishing and what that's going to look like for them. So hopefully this is giving lots of ideas to people and places to start, and we will supply copious show notes at the bottom of the episode for people to reference. So thanks both of you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.